Hello Summoners, welcome back to another ProGuides Wild Rift video. My name is Disappointing Kangas, and for the record, I'm not proud to make a return to the channel. I had the recent experience in a ranked duo game where my duo partner all-chatted the enemy team jungle diff, despite going 1-5 in lane and then aggressively running it down. Now out of respect, I will not name this duo partner, but let's just say that their name rhymes with Schmate and Schming. Now after this experience, I realized it's time we have a talk with Schmate and anyone else who struggles with keeping their cool in their games. So today we're talking about the unfortunate toxicity in Wild Rift and also how to help reduce it.
Okay, let's start off with the obvious statement that toxicity in competitive games isn't rare and is displayed in a lot of different ways in the game. It ranges from communication, cheating, actively holding people hostage, downplaying their efforts, and also just sabotaging matches. If you're familiar with the MOBA genre, then toxicity is not a foreign word for you. But let's start with the communication in games. All of you know that there are super strong meta, weaker off meta, and straight up weak champions. Every time you enter a champion select and see someone that's hovering Tryndamere, you're most likely gonna see some flame in chat. As most of you already know, Tryndamere is not really a champion that you want to see on your team, simply due to the fact of how weak he is in the meta. Don't get me wrong, it's completely fine to play any champion in the game. However, if you look at the game from a competitive angle, picking the best available champions just seems the most logical, right? Consequently, a lot of people feel annoyed or even enraged when they see that their teammates want to pick weaker champions. Even though it's still possible to win and not an automatic loss, it might be harder. Champions are meta for a reason. They're stronger and require way less effort to achieve the same or similar results than these weaker champions. But because it's more rare to see these champions carry games, it's way easier to flame people that pick them. While this may seem logical, it obviously isn't because you have no idea the skill of your teammate on that champion. I can't tell you how many times I've had a teamo actually carry me in games because the person's just insane on that champion. Making snap judgments based on a champion pick alone is not worth it, especially not for flaming your teammates. Go into the game with a positive attitude and just assume that your teammate knows what they're doing. But hey, if you find yourself getting flamed a lot in Champion Select, but you don't really know what's meta, well hey, check out our Discord in the description down below, join the community, and make some friends in there. We got a lot of people that love to talk about what's meta and what's not working, and also why. It's way more friendly than in Wild Rift chat, trust me. Now, moving on from the Champion Select into the game, we got another point that leads to toxicity. People underperforming, or more likely, people being perceived as if they were underperforming. But keep in mind, it doesn't really matter if you are underperforming or if somebody just thinks you are. In their eyes, you're the reason why they are losing the game. And in doing so, they completely exclude themselves from that reasoning. Seeing all the things that lead up to the event that in their eyes was the reason you are underperforming is just outside of their scope. They're stuck in viewing the event as an isolated incident, rather than a consequence of multiple events. Here, I'll explain. You're a Baron laner and you're currently pushing the first tower in your lane. Dragon is spawning in 20 seconds, and somebody on your team just thought it was a good idea to randomly face check the Fog of War, shortly after they're killed and stuck respawning in the fountain. Now, since you're a member down, it should be considered normal to just drop the dragon, unless the enemy used vital cooldowns and isn't in a position to contest it anymore. For some reason though, your team thinks that they can just waltz the dragon and straight up fight for it. You properly identified the situation as a lost cause and tried to do something in return. Regardless of your actions being correct, your team is still dying. Is that your fault? No, you told them that you're not coming. You tried to take something in return and you would have gotten quite a hefty lead for yourself, with which you may carry later. However, none of that matters to your team most of the time. I've seen a very common thought lately that if you lose the first dragon, it's either the Baron laner or the jungler's fault. And now the only thing that your team wants to do is flame in chat and vote surrender. Many players don't even know that it's not that problematic to lose a dragon. In fact, there's only two really good dragons that you actually want to fight for if possible, and those are the Mountain and Infernal Drakes. These are the best two dragons that you can ask for. The only other dragon that you need to contest is the Elder Dragon. Apart from that, you're fine trading a dragon for something else. But in instances like this, if your team is flaming you for trying to trade an objective elsewhere on the map, don't answer back with further flame. Getting toxic yourself will only make the situation worse. In situations like this, just calmly explain what you did and that you're gonna mute all so that everyone can cool down. You'd be surprised how often this actually works. Now before we move on to the next point, we're covering our question of the day. How often do you see toxicity in the game? For me, it's kinda sad, but I see it a lot. The most recent example that I gave you about dragons actually happened in my last game, and it is unbearable. But what about your experiences? Let me know in the comments down below. Next up on the list is straight up cheating. Cheating actually counts towards toxic behavior because it's simply unfair for all other players. The advantages that you gain while you cheat are impossible to achieve while playing normally. On one side, you're carrying your teammates in a way that no other human player could ever do on their own. On the other hand, you're denying the enemy team the chance to even participate simply for the fact that you're cheating. I mean, how can that be called competitive? And we did do a more in-depth video about that topic in another video about how hacks are destroying Wild Rift. So if you're curious about what's going on there, go check out that video. So another thing that's happening more frequently than you could possibly imagine is players holding a lobby hostage. Mid or feed, jungle or AFK, these are things that you've probably seen a ton of already. Some people just feel entitled to a position just because they believe that they're better. As for right now, there's not much you can do about those players. You can report them and hope that it's going to work out and that they get better, but we all know how Riot's system is working currently. At this point, we can only hope that they improve the detection of players trying to steal other players' roles. And by the way, Riot is trying to tackle the situation with the role selection. It's not fully implemented yet, and it's probably going to take some time until it's finalized. So we'll cover more on that as we learn more. But for example, in League of Legends PC, you get to choose a primary and a secondary role. Then the matchmaking tries to get you into a game. In order to keep queue times low, there's another feature called autofill. If there's too many people in the queue and too little of a specific role, the system will just randomly assign this role to a player. But even if that's the case, we could still have the issue of active hostage holding in Champion Select. There needs to be harsher consequences for players that choose to behave in this manner. Once players know that they'll be punished severely, they're much less likely to act out of line. And if you're somebody that steals other people's positions even after they've called it or it was assigned to them, all I gotta say is locking in a champion for that role is not going to win you the game. I mean, what are you supposed to do with an Orianna and an Ahri on your team? It just becomes ridiculously hard to win at that point, and at the end of the day, isn't that what you're trying to do? If all you want to do is play mid lane, play a normal game. If your goal is to win ranked games and earn LP, then play what's gonna win you games. If we all focus that way, the game will be much, much better. But of course, sadly, there is one thing that no system can ever fully detect, and that is soft inting a game. Every player can have an unfortunate game where just nothing seems to work out. That doesn't mean that you're actively grieving your teammates. You can very well be trying your best to win, but players might also choose to have unfortunate games. Let's think about a situation where you happen to play with a player that you hate for something that they did in a game of yours. You dislike them so much that you're willing to lose a game as long as they lose with you. In the game, you might think it's a good idea to try and fight a Lee Sin as an Evelynn level 2. Now, I think that most of you know that that's a terrible idea which will always kill the Evelynn, but how do you know if Evelynn did that on purpose? Unless we're talking about very high elo, we can't really make an argument that she's doing it 100% intentionally. She might just not know. Do you see the issue and why it's so hard to deal with? So to all the soft inters out there, all I can say is just work on your mental. Again, your focus should be to win your game. I've seen a lot of people say things in chat like, oh, this Garen's so bad, he doesn't deserve to win this game, so I'm gonna throw it. Well, what does that say about you and if you deserve to win games? I'm not lying, I would rather have a 1-9 Garen who's trying to win the game than a 1-5 Evelynn who is actively trying to lose. Because at the end of the day, it isn't just you and that player. There's 3 other people on your team. Do all those people also deserve to lose a game just because you're mad at one teammate? Even if you're mad at 2 teammates, does that mean that the other 2 people on your team deserve to lose the game just because of your frustration with 2 other people? Your emotional reaction to another person on your team is affecting others in the game. Your negativity is causing negativity for way more people. Think about it like alchemy. Equivalent exchange, right? If you're trying to punish one person on your team by throwing a game, what you're really doing is punishing 4 people. You just wasted 5 people's time because your time was also wasted. It's tough to know if somebody's soft inting on purpose or if they're just bad at the game. But either way, your focus should be to try and win. Keep that mental strong and keep going forward. Of course, there is always a more extreme variant of this, actively sabotaging the game by straight running it down a lane. Some players appear to have a breakdown in-game if something or a sequence of events aren't going their way. That might be the first dragon thing that we talked about. Maybe a jungler taking away your red buff when you're playing AD carry. There's a lot of potential things that lead to someone running it down. The most recent thing that I happened to see was a mid laner that got upset over getting ganked. Our Baron laner told him that it's okay and we'll win anyway. But briefly after that, we lost the dragon and our mid laner just straight up quit. He started berating the mid laner with messages. That spam wasn't something that you like to read ever. One small advice here, there's no way that you can argue with a player when they're that heated. If you really want to win, there's a few things that you can do. One thing that I don't really like to do but can work is actually just lying. I know it can be really frustrating to do, but if you just say something simple like, "my bad, won't happen again," oftentimes that'll be enough for a really heated player. Because at the end of the day, they're responding emotionally to an event. If you answer that heated emotion with an opposite, cooler emotion, such as asking for forgiveness, that'll oftentimes cool down the situation. But my preferred strategy instead is to type out something simple like, "hey guys, we can still win, let's just focus on the game," and mute all. Responding to toxic messages with something calm and simple and direct like this can oftentimes lead to a game completely turning around. Because it does one of two things. One, cools down the situation a little bit, and two, it prevents people from typing, which means that they spend their time thinking about the game instead. But in that last example that I gave, unfortunately our Baron laner didn't have that presence of mind, and that's also okay. It's not uncommon for people in that position to be overwhelmed with that much negativity, especially if they know that they're not the one at fault. Long story short, in this situation, my Baron laner argued, the mid laner said something like, "say one more thing and I'm gonna run it down," which sounds like some cliche Rambo-esque catchphrase, and yeah, shortly after, my mid laner did proceed to run it down. Luckily though, if somebody managed to int enough, they will get punished by the game. But reaching that point is hard, and you have to really try to get yourself banned. Oh, and PC League suffers from the same issues. There's no harsh punishment for anything but saying bad words and literally running it down. In my opinion, Riot could increase the penalties by a lot, and one way to start would be with high elo first. Try and monitor the very peak of the ladder and spot for toxic behavior. Lots of players idolize those high elo players, and if it was known that Riot starts doing something about behavior there, it would be a step in the right direction. A lot of people simply lose the joy in playing games when they're facing this much toxicity. The level of play and the motivation to actually win has dropped by a mile. And yeah, I'm talking about League of Legends PC Challenger games specifically. Ages ago, there was a thing called the Tribunal. Players were able to manually review what other players did in their games. Chat logs, statistics, and report details were given to the reviewers, giving them information to cast a proper vote. If the majority of players agreed that the player showed toxic behavior, they were penalized. In severe cases, Riot employees manually reviewed the case. Getting a system like that back could potentially grant players a feeling of actually having impact on what is happening, rather than just seeing the Blitzcrank bot replying to your report. Nonetheless, I think it's a great addition to have chat monitored properly, but I don't even think that's enough, because at the end of the day, some players don't care if they get banned. They'll just make another account and keep going. The issue isn't necessarily with the policing of the game, but the players in it. And that comes into our last point, the general negative attitude in gamers. Many players will straightforward downplay what you do in game. They could say, "well played," and that would really motivate you because it makes you feel good. But rather than doing that, they're busy telling you what you could have done better in their eyes. It's just not fun, and it doesn't feel rewarding at all when players look down on you. And this also frequently happens in Champ Select. People say, "lol, you're only Diamond 1 and want my role," forget it. Just for your information, there's currently no way of viewing somebody's win rate on some website. Therefore, you can't really check your teammates' accounts while you're in lobby with them. Theoretically, you could be a 100% win rate Diamond 1 and someone could still smack talk you, just because they're a Challenger player and you are just Diamond 1. Kinda weird, isn't it? Yet this isn't only a problem in high and low, it happens in every bracket. You can see the same thing coming from a Silver 4 player to a Bronze 4 player. There's not really anything you can do about that one.
Now before we end this video, there's one more thing I want to tell you. Focus on yourself. Try to enter a mental state of growth. Don't dwell on the past, but learn from it. Making mistakes isn't a problem, it's the most human thing about you. But refusing to learn and then repeating those mistakes over and over again, that's the problem. You can be the difference though, and that will be the biggest factor in your future climb if you just constantly work on bettering yourself. I believe in you, and we here at ProGuides are here to help. And yes, even you, Schmate. Thanks for watching, everybody. Stay hydrated, and I'll see you next time.